you're here for the first time, what we do is we have a speaker come and then we have a conversation. So after the talk, we open up to conversation. So your voice is important. We ask you not to leave your beliefs or your background or your baggage at the door, to come with your questions, your curiosity, your convictions, so that we can, open up some stuff. This past week we had a lot open up for us as a community with what went down in the legal system, and we had a lot of conversations with people who were, stirring up. Some things got stirred up for a lot of people. Men and women expressing stories that they've never shared before. And that's a beautiful thing, to be able to share stories and secrets that have never been shared before. And it was on the backdrop of a terrible thing. And so last week we talked about rigorous honesty. And what I said about rigorous honesty was that I had a favorite author who I never read. And that was my rigorous honesty. I only read his quotes, He seduced me with his quotes, and one of his quotes was Frederick Buechner. He said, "This is the world. Terrible and beautiful things will happen here. Be not afraid." And it was like a wonderful quote that said, like, you can walk the world and not be, afraid of the world. You can walk in peace. So after I listened to a little bit of his book, because I promised you that I'd be a little bit more rigorous, honest, and listen to, or at least read his book. I listened to Todd's Kind Mind podcast. If you haven't subscribed to it, it's your new addiction. I'm serious, it's good stuff. So I listened to it, and he had a quote that said, "Don't seek to be, to have all things be well in your world, but seek to be well with all things." And isn't that great? That's worth the subscription right there. So that's the same thing. It's saying, like, the world is going to be a tattered and jagged place, but we get to decide how we're going to navigate it. So today we have Todd as a speaker, and we also have a pretty strong all-male lineup. We had Robert Ryden singing his music, and then we have Al, who brought banana bread, and he's going to be singing us out. Thank you, Al. And then we have Rhinestone Shop, who is going to sing us a song, and then we have Will, who's passing the basket, and then Dave, the monk in the back, who anchors the slides, and he does a lot here. So, and then we have Todd Fink, and Todd Fink is, again, if you've been listening to him at all, he is a musician, he's a speaker, he's a teacher, he is a Renaissance man, and he is the founder of the Giving Tree band, and he is having a real impact on the world through his podcast and his talks and his music. And so I think you're in for a real treat. Lean in, listen up, and give it up for Todd Fink.
Maureen, thank you everybody, and I'm really honored to be here and grateful for the opportunity to experience this church with you, this alternative church. All around us we see institutions crumbling, and we're trying to dig through the rubble to see what's worth preserving, and I think one of the most important things is fellowship. We know through psychological research that in the 20th century, if you belonged to a church, you lived on average 5 years longer. And it's not so much that you earned some special favor with your particular God, but because friendship and fellowship and that kind of socialization keeps people healthy. It's probably the most strongest indicator of lifespan. How much bonding with like-minded folks can you accomplish in your network? And like Maureen said, I usually speak for an hour or more, and the hardest thing for me is trying to speak for a short amount of time. So just let me know if I get carried away. And this topic of intention and purpose is so vast, I would love to write a book about it one day. But when it comes up, I think of this story that I'd like to share with you first. It's a mythological story about the library at Alexandria in ancient Egypt. And this library contained all the wisdom of the world at the time. And tragically, it burned in a great fire. And there's a little mythological story about a single book that was spared. And it wasn't about anything too interesting, so it sold for a few coins to a poor farmer who wanted to preserve something from this great library. And as he was reading it or looking through it, he also didn't find anything particularly interesting until he came to a random page in the middle where there was some different parchment paper attached, and on it were some specific instructions for locating the mythological touchstone. You may have heard of the Philosopher's Stone from Harry Potter films. This is a particular rock that can turn any ordinary metal into gold. So whoever's in possession of this stone will have all their dreams come true. And when the farmer reads this, he believes it. It speaks to him, it resonates with him as truth. So he decides to leave everything in search of the magic touchstone. And the instructions say that it is on a particular shore of the Black Sea, so he has a long journey ahead of him, and he sells all his possessions, which were few, to get the tools he needs to trek and search for the stone. And eventually he arrives on that particular shore, but there's a problem. The shore is covered with rocks that all look the same. So he goes back to the instructions, and they say, you will know it's the magic touchstone because it is warm to the touch, but all the other stones will be cold. So he starts to pick up rocks, and rock after rock, it's cold. And then he realizes, I can't just keep picking up random rocks and dropping them, because I'm probably picking up the same rocks over and over again. So he needs to devise a plan to systematically search for this touchstone. And he decides he'll pick up a rock. If it's cold, he'll throw it into the sea. Then he won't pick it up again. And so he does this for the whole day. No luck. Comes back the next day, all day, picking up rocks. They're all cold, throws them all into the sea. And his life goes on like this for a whole week, then a whole month, and then a whole year goes by, and it seems like he hasn't even put a dent in the rocks on the shore. And then 2 years, and then 3 years, and finally he's starting to think that he's going mad. So he says, this is it. I have to give up this dream. But he reaches down for one more rock, and it's warm. But in the next moment, he throws it into the sea. So, why would he do such a thing? Because of habit. Because of the force of his habit. Yet, he knew what his intention was. He knew what his purpose was. But he wasn't able to fulfill it. Not because some magical or some profound departure from what he believed in. It just sort of crept up on him. And I think that story is so applicable to life today because more so than any other time in previous history, we are subject to all kinds of propaganda. We're at risk of being mind-hacked even by all of the advertising in this modern world. And to know what your true purpose is and to stay true to that authentically is more of a challenge than ever before. Because the marketing that happens now is tailored specifically to you, whereas before it was just general advertisements. Now we live in a world that's algorithmically programmed to move you in just the right way, to keep you engaged in just the right way. You think of something like social media, it's free to use. Facebook, Instagram, all these applications cost nothing. So how can it cost nothing and be a viable service? Somebody's got to be paying. And the people who are paying are the advertisers. So the advertisers are the customers, and we are the product. They sell our attention to the buyers. And that's why everybody's engaged on it. And they want to be able to show, like, here's when Todd gets up, here's what Todd's interested in, here's the boots Todd likes to wear, and so on. So the point here is that we're constantly bombarded with messages that are tailored to move us in a certain way, and oftentimes just become an echo chamber for our own beliefs. And we don't really get the opportunity to expand and challenge our worldview. seems like we're more connected with the whole world and all the ideas of the world than ever before. But it turns out that our news feeds are not real journalistic feeds, but they're just echo chambers. Could you imagine if you get onto Wikipedia, which is sort of like a social media site, but it's not. It's like an encyclopedia that anyone can edit. But could you imagine if when you do a search on Wikipedia, it brings up the explanation that suits your personality, that's tailored to your political beliefs. So you look up a president, you look up a war, and it explains it according to what you will like or what you will be engaged in. We would think that would be totally ridiculous, but that's exactly how a newsfeed works. So anyways, the point with intention and purpose is we have to look inward to see what is it that really resonates with me about values and my personal mission. And the challenge then is to honor those values even when the circumstances are not favorable. When the circumstances are not favorable for us to be kind, and I explore how to be kind throughout all of these episodes of the podcast, but when the circumstances are not favorable, that is actually when we get to be kind. To be kind because everybody is nice to me and favorable to me is really just more like business. Well, you paid me with a smile, so I owe you something. That's not the real kindness. The real kindness is, I don't have to be this way, and it's not being earned by anybody. Like you think of a simple example of being in traffic and another car is waiting to get on the road, so you wave that person in. Why do we do that? That we don't owe that person anything, but we might think, well, because I'm a courteous driver. And then that person pulls in front of you and doesn't even acknowledge your presence. And then if we're thinking, I'm grateful bastard. Well then, was it really about kindness? Or were we in a subtle way buying appreciation? So, this is what values are all about. Values are all about how I want to live. And there's no way we can all have the same values. I've been asking people in the hospital, I've worked for Linden Oaks part-time and full-time and as needed for almost 20 years now, 17 years. And I've been asking for that whole time, I've been asking patients that I've worked with to elicit their core values, their top 4 or 5 values in order of priority. And so far, I've never come across 2 people with the same 5 values in the same order. And it's interesting because it helps me realize more and more we're different, and that's okay. But we forget what the values are when people don't live our values. I would say the idea that somebody would behave or act the way I would is what is the definition of an expectation. And Mark Twain said, I don't have any expectations, therefore I'm never disappointed. So it's important to figure out what our values are if we want to have a purpose. And for 2 reasons. One, there's not unlimited time. Life is very short no matter how you slice it. It's getting extended here and there, but I think somebody was mentioning that lifespan is actually starting to shorten because of increase in suicide rates among middle-aged men. And so who knows how long that trend will continue, that lifespan is expanding. But there's limited time. In fact, I've talked about in other sessions and other podcasts that the fact that we do die is what gives rise to purpose at all. And I hypothesize that if there was never a death for human beings, if after the Big Bang and when human life emerged, if death wasn't a part of the equation, would we ever even have religion? Religion was a way to try to make sense of this great mystery. Where does everybody go? So, teleos in ancient Greek, the root word for the end, means purpose. So, limited time, we have to choose. You can do anything, but you can't do everything because there's limited time. And then secondly, high distractibility. If you ask somebody, what would you like to plan for your lunch at work Thursday of this week? People will pick something relatively healthy. I think I'll have a nice salad and maybe apple will be my treat. If you ask somebody, what do you want right now? It won't be that. We'll have the banana bread and I'll have a candy bar. The point is that we have a sense, like the farmer in the touchstone story, we have a sense of what we're here to do and what we're all about, but moment to moment we deviate from it without realizing it. So, limited time, high distractibility. And if we can put that together, we can live a life that's meaningful and authentic. So I hope you feel comfortable asking questions when that time comes, and we can have a spirited conversation. And I hope you'll check out the Kind Mind podcast. I also have an email list to share other events with you. Maureen and I will be doing future conversations together. And I'll leave you with this, with coming back to the touchstone story. There's also a deeper symbolism. I think the touchstone to me in that story, when I first heard it, after further reflection, I think it represents the human heart. The instruction said that it would be the only warm one among many, many cold stones. It's so easy for our heart to turn cold. I don't like what's happening, I don't like this person. Difficult to have compassion for the enemy. And yet, that's what every great teacher of all time, that is the one universal truth. Compassion. And we now know that the happiest people ever recorded through MRI studies are meditating on compassion, whether it's a Buddhist monk or a modern meditator. So, the heart that can stay warm means that anything that comes into contact with that kind of being, that kind of kind energy, turns to gold. Turns to gold, is uplifted by that warmth. So let's conclude my portion of this with a little meditation. If you wouldn't mind setting your things down and sitting straight. Please bring your awareness to your body in the chair. Just notice the sensation of contact. Feel the sensation of your feet touching the floor. The sensation that we're supported by the earth. And then please bring your awareness to your breath. In this practice, you don't need to change anything. Just pay attention with your awareness to what is actually there. See if you can notice how the breath begins and how it ends. Notice your body expand and contract, however it naturally does. And listen to the sound, which will be easier when you practice in your own quiet space. Try to listen to the sound of your breath, of air flowing in and out. What you will notice is that it sounds like the ocean. In fact, one of the oldest words for breath in Sanskrit meant wave. Incoming breath, incoming wave. Outgoing breath, like an outgoing wave. And as we tune into that rhythm, you notice that it's peaceful. The vast ocean of awareness is right there. Rest your mind there. Center yourself on your breath. And then you can realign with your purpose, your personal mission in the world. Feel deep appreciation for this, for the breath, noticing that each inhalation feels good. It brings more oxygen to the body. Each exhalation feels good. Relieving carbon dioxide. And then you can slowly bring your awareness back to your body and to the room, and when you feel ready, you may open your eyes. Thank you, everybody.